I'm John Clements from Jackson Clements Burrows Architects, and I'm here with Hannah Wexler, who's my project architect for the divided house. This is actually my own house. Divided house is in Clifton Street in Richmond. We actually lived in the street for about 6 or 7 years. I come from a family of 4, got 2 kids. We lived in the street for about 4 or 5 years prior to purchasing this site. And we had a kind of intimate knowledge of the site and also of the neighbours in this location. Richmond Hill's covered by a blanket heritage overlay, so a new house is going to have to respond to a range of considerations in that regard. Maria was an Italian woman who lived in this house and owned it, and she passed away sadly. She lived in the house from 1958 until we purchased the property and built this house with her husband. And the concept of demolishing the house, which was considered non-contributory by council, was a bit of a challenge for us in terms of recognising the history of the site. At the time I was doing quite a bit of work with Ian Strange, who's a contemporary Australian artist who's got a studio in New York and Melbourne. And Liz and I both share a sort of very keen interest in contemporary art, and Ian's art practice is basically around doing installations on houses that are targeted for demolition in essence, and explores the idea of home displacement, history and stories within houses before they're demolished. Ian installed an exhibition in the house and broadcast the exhibition through social media, and 2,500 people came through the house to experience the house before it was demolished. We're left with a greenfield site, and we conceived of this house as 2 built forms, one addressing Clifton Street on the left and one addressing Waverley Street on the right. Both houses had to address quite different streetscape context, and then we would connect these 2 houses, so it was sort of, you know, parents' house and kids' house, if you like, and a space in which we'd come together, which was in the form of a lean-to that joined the two buildings. They're both brick buildings, and they explore 2 different interiors: a concrete interior in the Clifton Street house and a timber interior in the Waverley Street house. We also realised that this was going to be quite a large house in terms of the way we lived at this point in time, but we imagined that we might want to reduce the size of the house in the future, and we designed it from the beginning to be able to be subdivided into 2 dwellings. Floor plans, ground floor plan at the top of the page and north up the page. The Clifton Street house is on the left and accommodates the retreat living areas and dining space and study. I've got a studio downstairs in the basement adjoining a guest bedroom and bathroom, and then the Waverley Street on the right hand side accommodates cars in the garage, service areas, and then the kids' bedrooms above, the master bedrooms above in the Clifton Street house, addressing city views on the left. And the Clifton Street building terminates at a roof terrace with city views as well. The 2 buildings were separated intentionally to allow sunlight to pass through our site and into the neighbouring building below this site, because it was at a lower height level and addressed the north frontage. Clifton Street frontage conceived basically as a contemporary interpretation of a terrace house and the Waverley Street frontage and the courtyard space that exists between the 2 buildings. And this is the lean-to that connects the 2 houses, if you like, and it's really designed as a space that spills out into the garden, that there's a sort of a seamless interaction between the 2 spaces. We're also interested in the idea of perforated stainless steel and utilising it in different methods and how it might address light and ventilation, shading. This image shows the relationship of the house to the street. It was really important from our perspective to sort of compete with the notion or the traditional idea of the terrace, which is very shut down to a street, and actually open the living spaces up and address the outdoor courtyard and address the street in a social sense. We also introduced a small seat for people to park on their way up the hill. And again, talking to light and ventilation, perforated steel which threads its way through the interiors and actually connects both houses and the space in between. And it's demonstrated in the image on the left, which is the front door, and during daylight the perforated material actually reads as solid, and then when we light the house during the night it reveals itself in a different way, and you can see how the front door then reveals itself as a 4-panel door, which is a nod to the traditional Victorian doors. The concrete building is the first building that you address as you come into the house in the entry in this lobby space, and it's essentially a container or backdrop for the contemporary art. Basically, it's meant to complement those pieces of work and actually, I guess, enhance the reading of the artwork within the interior spaces, and then the sense of light and transparency that's brought in through the perforated mesh. Basement, studio and study on the left-hand side. And again, the artwork as a backdrop to the concrete. The rear building accommodates the kids' bedrooms areas. It's more domestic in nature. It also addresses quite a beautiful lemon-scented gum, and the material palette again connected by the brickwork and steel. And views out through these stainless steel veils. You can see how the light plays into the spaces. Contrasting with that kind of neutral palette throughout the house, we're interested in the idea of exploring colour, and in particular we had did a survey of various eucalypts and the colours that they go into flower for these sort of short moments of life. So you have this spring bloom that comes out in this intense colour, and we thought that would be a nice way to kind of contrast or differentiate from the more neutral interiors throughout the house. The bathrooms explore these intensive block colours. And that idea of the block colour is also revealed inside joinery. So the experience of opening drawers actually gives you different colour experiences and connects again with this idea of the sort of the pop of the flowers. Detail, exploring steel as a fine linear element throughout the house, and then also just exploring ideas that we were interested in the practice in terms of inventive details, how we could make little opening cabinets, light fittings, levers that would lift desks, and even to the degree of conceiving fire tools that would be complementary to the interior. And from a sustainability perspective, there's a sort of a comprehensive approach throughout the house. Obviously, solar's included to the full extent of the Waverley Street house. There's stormwater retention. There was a connection between the garden that related back to Maria. We've introduced Mediterranean plants as a relationship to Maria's presence on the site from 1958, and then in contrast to that, Indigenous plants that recognise the full history of the site. And the stormwater retention obviously reticulated back through the house and up to the swimming pool. Thank you.